So you know Benyamin Cohen a little bit now, and I would like to talk about Karen Carlson. You can take the first seat. Karen and I met in, I think it was 2018, right? When you came to Ulm. She is a child and grandchild of Holocaust survivors. And she grew up in Chicago in this culture of silence. You didn't talk about your Jewish identity. But her mother was born here in Ulm. And she comes back and forth. She's researching her family story throughout Europe. She's always coming to Ulm and speaking about refugees, how you can stand up for people today in the world that we have right now with all of the things that are going on. And she helped, not only she's helping us, the Discovery Center, but she's also helping the Einstein's Museum, and you can learn more about the entire family in the Einstein Museums. And she was an educator. She was a teacher, a principal, a director and superintendent of schools in Chicago, and she gives great presentations. So if anyone here would like to have her talk about her family and her life story and what she thinks we should do today, please invite Karen. So thank you very much, Karen, for joining the panel today. Then I would like to introduce Mirjam Mahler. She is a volunteer in the Discovery Center. She met Karen a couple years ago, and they became friends and did a lot together. And since then, she does a lot for our organization, for the organizing things. She's also an instructor at the Volkshochschule, and she has a great background in project management. She's written books, and she organized the entire panel discussion today and all the events with the organizational teams. She did the discussion part here, and she's going to be leading us today in this panel discussion. And thank you very much, Mirjam, for all that you've done here. And I'm looking forward to working more with you. And I would like to also welcome Joachim Ankerhold. He's a professor of theoretical physics here at the University of Ulm, and he's vice president of research for the university. He's also the academic speaker for the Quantum BV, Baden-Württemberg. You're also a co-founder of the Carl Zeiss Stiftung Center for Quantum Physics called Q-Photon. And also founder and co-speaker of the Quantum Technology Network, so he's really into the physics aspect of things. But I would like to talk to him on a personal note, because I came to Ulm in 2009 with my husband, who became a professor here, also physicist, and I've known you since that time. And in 2016, together with 9 other people, we founded, the association was called at that point the Verein der Freunde eines Albert Einstein Museums in Ulm, and you were a founding member. And were a member of the board until it got to be such a big thing that you said you can't be a university professor and vice president of the university and everything, and now he's on the member of the advisory board. And he is our link to the university and also to the politicians here in the city.
Okay, well, thank you for joining us. We asked our members for some questions for our panel today. So I will be asking these questions for our members. So Benjamin, what are the most common questions that you get asked as Albert Einstein? And where do these questions come from?
Well, I do get asked a lot of questions about like help with science homework. People are always surprised that Einstein, even this morning, I posted a video last night of the concert, and people are always commenting, what? What are you doing from the grave? How did you come back to life? How are you posting? So those are the most common questions I get. People ask me, the biggest question I get, I don't know if I should be surprised or not, the biggest question I get is people ask me if Einstein's first wife, Mileva, deserves more credit than she got in the history books. Because she was a fellow physicist. They met at physics school. She took better notes than he did, and that's why he would go to her house and study with her notes, and that's how they started their relationship. And there are some people who believe that she helped him, while he was writing, in 1905, writing all of those important papers. And so a lot of people want to know about her. Like, she seems like a lost character to a lot of his fans, I think.
So maybe you should have her social media too now.
Right.
Yeah. So Joachim and Nancy, you mentioned some things in passing, Benjamin, about Einstein's science, but could you just give us a few examples of where we see Einstein in our daily life? And you have...
You already mentioned a few things. General relativity is certainly the most famous, discovery. I wouldn't say that Einstein invented GPS, because this is a technology, and Einstein set the theoretical foundation for general relativity, and it's indeed, let's say, another step to bring this to technology. But definitely, without his theory, GPS wouldn't work. You are completely right. Einstein was one of the main figures and founding fathers of quantum mechanics, of quantum physics. He was presumably the first who understood when Planck at 1900 came up with this strange construction to introduce a constant of nature, h, and he didn't know what to do with it, and Einstein did. So he basically explained the photoelectric effect, as you said, in 1905, which brought him the Nobel Prize. And this, of course, has consequences. It's everything that solar panels, for example, whenever there is light and matter interaction present, then to some extent Einstein's theory is part of it. It's not that he is the only one, but it's definitely a substantial part of it. As I said, he was one of the, founding fathers of quantum physics, and we are celebrating this year 100 years of quantum mechanics, so there were many people involved in this. And Einstein was not always, and I think till his end of his life, really happy with quantum mechanics, because there is a few pieces in quantum mechanics that really bothered him. And one thing was the statistical nature of quantum mechanics. And for us as scientists, Einstein in the mid-30s realized these strange characteristics of quantum physics very well. So he came up with the Gedanken experiment. This is, Johannes of course knows this very well. It comes with the name EPR, Einstein, Podolsky, Rosen. So these were the three authors. And Einstein very well understood that quantum mechanics implies that there is no, predefined characteristics of microscopic matter. There is non-locality, an inherent property of quantum physics. And he, in this Gedanken experiment, illustrated the consequences which, on his view, were sort of fine at the time where he published this paper, but that quantum physics as such needed a further step forward. So, and this is something, when we talking now about this year's Nobel Prize, where people also discovered, 40 years ago, the genuine effect of quantum mechanics, macroscopic quantum tunneling. And I have to say this now because I know these people very well. This is actually the field I'm working in. And I never thought when I wrote my PhD that in the last day there are a few newspapers and was to explain them what I did during my PhD and how these guys are and what their personality and blah, blah, blah. So this is fine to know. But this is, so these questions that Einstein posed in the mid-30s are still science that we are working on to understand the, strange properties compared to classical physics, the strange properties of quantum mechanics. And so us, from our side, this is still, say, living questions that we have to answer and that we are working on.
Would you like to add something, Nancy?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
No, okay, no, okay. I mean, I've read so much. I didn't really know Albert Einstein that well because the only physics I thought I had from him was a little bit of special relativity at the university. Because at the time when I was studying, it was interesting. We didn't talk about it as being Einstein's work for some reason. It was always like we would talk about Gedanken experiments, but they were just called Gedanken experiments. It was only later that I learned that most of the ones that I've heard, for quantum mechanics, for instance, had to do with Einstein. And that came when I came here and I started reading more and more and studying more about Einstein's physics. And the more I read and the more I learn about what he did, the more I see where he was all over in my career. Like when I studied quantum mechanics, I didn't know that he was asking these very, very important questions, very philosophical questions. And I look back at it and I said, wow, this guy did quantum mechanics. He did also the theory of relativity. He worked on lots of statistical mechanics. He was with a Brownian motion. He was also investigating, he was able to determine the size of molecules. So all these type of things come into our world. And one of them that's really close to my heart is he laid some of the fundamental knowledge on stimulated emission. This is what led to the laser, and that's what's really important to me because I design at Carl Zeiss Meditech in Oberkochen. I design microscopes for eye surgery, and I use lasers to help surgeons investigate eyes, to see the layers of the eye during surgery so that they can heal people or correct problems. So that's one of the things that lies very close to me is the stimulated emission part of lasers. Mm.
Karen, from the perspective of a relative, could you tell us a little bit about what the city of Ulm is doing to honor Einstein and his work?
So the first time I came to Ulm was 1977. This was before Ulm started its push to reconcile with the Jewish community. And I actually had a pretty bad experience. I won't go into it. But then in 1997, my mother said, Karen, I want to invite you on a trip. Ulm is inviting us. And what they did is they started to have these reunions. They actually started when it was 40-year anniversary from Kristallnacht. But only 5 people came because this was not a pleasant event, and people didn't really want to celebrate this, and they were terrified to come back. But those 5 people got together, and they stayed in touch with a lot of the former residents of Ulm. And 5 years later, they created a reunion, and they had the good sense to put it on Schwarmontag, which was a happy time. And I was part of like 156 people that came from all over the world, the whole diaspora of people that left Ulm that survived. And every year I've come back. In 2004, Ulm did a 125th birthday party for Albert Einstein, and they invited the 5 family members that were the closest, and my mother was one of them, and she brought me, and she brought my brother, and one of my daughters, and my niece. And suddenly it's like, oh, there's something like very special here. And so anyway, I've been coming back. In 2018, I was invited to give a talk about Albert Einstein and my family. And a few years before that, Ulm rebuilt the synagogue, and I was invited to that as well, to cut the ribbon. And in 2018, that's when I met Nancy. And there she was with a group of people wearing the T-shirts, a little different version of the T-shirt. And it's like, what is this? And then they came up to me and wanted my autograph. Nobody ever asked me for my autograph. It was really something. And so we went to breakfast and we became fast friends. And I was brought here and I was allowed to spend a whole month here. And Stadt Ulm helped me to research my family. I went through the archives with Ingo Bergman. I brought with me a whole suitcase of, my mother had diaries that she kept from 1933 to 1939. So this was her teenage years. So from time she was 12 to 39. But I couldn't read them. So Ulm helped me to get them translated. And that opened windows into who I am. And anyway, I could go on. I had all these letters that were written in German from all these people that she stayed in touch with. And I started to build who my family was. And I wouldn't be here if it weren't for Albert Einstein, because Albert Einstein saved my mother's life. And if my mother had been like all the other Ulmers who were not saved, and they went to Theresienstadt and they were all killed, of course I wouldn't be here. So to me, he's really special. And so anyway, I could go on, but I think we have to give a lot of credit to Stadt Ulm, because then they decided to build the Museum die Einsteins, and I hope you go there because it tells our family's history and Einstein's history in Ulm. And so I was actually privileged to be able to talk a little bit about it in the museum.
I think what is so fascinating about your story is that he didn't just send money or he didn't just write a letter. He did something much more active. Can you go into this a little bit?
Yeah, so in 1938, after Kristallnacht, my grandparents decided it wasn't safe to be in Ulm anymore. And so Albert Einstein was my grandmother's first cousin. And so you have to know that he was close to his cousins, his girl cousins. He liked them. And his wife, his second wife, Elsa, was also his first cousin. So they had the same relationship. And so she wrote to him, and he sponsored my mother. He paid the money for her trip. He had to show his bank accounts to the government. I mean, that's exposing yourself. The Institute for Advanced Study had to produce documents that proved that he actually had a position where if she couldn't make it in America, he would pay her way. He did all these things. He invited her to live with him for the first few weeks before, so she could get started. And so he was really a mensch, as you said. And then a year later, my grandparents were still stuck in Germany. Now, this was 1940, September. It was already pretty bad and very hard to get out. And he helped them. And when they got to Berlin, they flew to Moscow because now the war was raging in France, and they couldn't go through France like my mother had. So they had to go to Moscow, and they took the Trans-Siberian Express all the way across Russia, Siberia, China, Korea, Japan. They then took a boat to San Francisco. Now, what's interesting is that they were strip searched, and they were only allowed to take 4 Deutschmark, or I think the equivalent of $4 US with them. And they had this long journey. So can you imagine how hard that would be to pay for this with 4 Deutschmarks each, or $4 dollars? And so my grandfather was smart. He bought cigars with all of the money he had, and he did a lot of bartering, but they still got stuck, and Einstein wired money. And then when they got to San Francisco, the reporters were there because he was their sponsor, and it was listed. And so my grandmother was interviewed, and he helped my grandfather get his first job. And he wrote a story of their journey in 5 segments. It was published in the paper, and that was his first job. So he kept helping. And then my mother didn't want to go to San Francisco. He said, Anneliese has a good position in New York. Let her stay. So then she fell in love and got married. I mean, he just kept helping over and over. And then after the war, my uncle got stuck in a DP camp, And he also sponsored my aunt and uncle. He wanted to bring this girlfriend, and Einstein said, "I will only sponsor her if you marry her." So they got married, and the
Wow.
rest is history.
Wow.
So coming back to Ulm and to the Discovery Center, we showed you the site yesterday where we want to build the Discovery Center. And since you are Albert Einstein in the public eye, I would like to ask you, what would he want to be inside the Discovery Center?
Well, Einstein never liked the word museum. And so, anytime people build something, he never wanted it to be called an Einstein Museum. So I think it's great that you're calling it the Discovery Center, and also that it's a place of learning, I think would be and place of learning for children. I think all of those aspects would be very meaningful for Einstein, because that was what was important to him. He was, like I said, he's a very humble guy, and so he never wanted it to be like a history museum and here's artifacts of Einstein and things like that. I think the fact that it's an active educational science learning center, I think would be very interesting for him. When he died, he did not want to be buried because he didn't want his grave to become a celebrity attraction and people come and worship the gravesite. And so he wanted to be cremated, and he was cremated except for the brain and the eyes. And they threw his ashes over the Delaware River for that reason, because he didn't want people to come and go, see all this great Einstein stuff. He wanted his theories to live on, not necessarily for himself to live on.
So Nancy, how much of Albert Einstein will be in the Einstein Discovery Center?
Well, I would say that's the founding part of the Discovery Center. We want people to learn about Einstein, but learn about how you can be a better person, how you can, show what he has done, learn about his science, be encouraged to become a scientist, be encouraged to do anything that is like passionately curious, you said here. Do what you think is your curiosity. And we want to, Einstein is in there. We're going to be showing his life, we're going to be showing who he's working with and understand the times, but it will also be a lot about learning, especially about his science, but also about music, about the institutions that were important to him. He was also in this anti-lynching society. He was a founder with Paul Robeson, I think it was. Yeah.
E.B. Du Bois.
Okay. And then, and we want the knowledge to be out there, so you learn more about him, but go out of there saying, oh, what can I do? Well, how can I be encouraged in society? How can I learn more about science? How can I contribute?
And Ulm University has a focus on quantum physics and technology. So could you tell us a little bit more, Joachim, of the landscape that you're trying to build as an ecosystem where the Discovery Center is also going to have a place?
Sure. Well, let me start with a short remark, because one has to understand that quantum physics is not a branch within the field of physics. There is, of course, different fields in physics. There is solid-state physics, there is atomic physics, there is plasma physics, there is semiconductor physics, there's astronomy, so different fields, but they are based on very few, conceptual frames. And as far as we know, as of today, quantum mechanics is the basis of physics as such. So every type of theory, everything that somehow explains processes in nature can be traced back to quantum physics. It is not always that quantum physics appears on the same level on different phenomena, but basically quantum physics is the basis of physics as such. This is something one has to understand, because sometimes people say, well, it's quantum physics, why is it that the physics department in Ulm is focusing on quantum physics? I'm always saying that we are not no one can escape quantum physics. So once you're a physicist, you have to deal with quantum physics, no way out. So we started already, say, 15 years ago. When I was hired, I was part of this process of Ulm University to focus on quantum physics, also with the perspective to develop technology out of quantum physics. So fundamental physics, but also with this perspective. And there were a few other colleagues. Johannes was also part of this. There were a few other colleagues. So basically, the department has a complete change of generation. There was new professors coming, and this is always, say, when you share the same ideas, and you have good ideas how to proceed, then you can really push something forward. So the first thing was that we understood we have to somehow join forces, and we did this within the Quantum Center that we, in 2013, formed together with the University of Stuttgart and Max Planck Institute in Stuttgart. Now Karlsruhe University, KIT, is also part of this. And then we started to somehow, through various projects, push things forward with the idea not only to do excellent, say, physics from the fundamental point of view, but also thinking about how this can be, say, bring us to new technology based on the, say, strange aspects of quantum physics, those that are closely related to the wavy nature of quantum mechanics. We talked about quantum physics is already, say, part of our daily life. We talked about solar panels, lasers. This is, as we say, the first generation of technology. Now we are thinking about the second generation of technology, which is based on this non-locality property of quantum mechanics, on the property of interferences, so that in case you have waves can interfere constructively or deconstructively, so they can basically, when you have, say, think about water waves. This is the easiest thing to think about this. And this phenomenon is very, very fragile. So you have to really do something in order to make this available, say, for technology. And this is something that we are currently doing. And there is different fields, different, say, directions in which we think that this could happen, let's say, very soon. One is the most famous one, and the Nobel Prize was to some extent given also to this field, is quantum computing. But then there is quantum sensing, quantum communication, quantum simulation. So these are the fields where we think this second generation type of technology is going to step forward. So this is what we basically pushed. Then we talked to the politicians because we said, well, we have to team up. It's not only Ulm University, Stuttgart, it's basically the high-tech land, Baden-Württemberg. Yeah? The politicians were a bit hesitant, but then the company leaders from Zeiss, from Bosch, from Daimler, they teamed up with us and said, well, to the politicians, we need to do something. And this is how Quantum BW, which is the Quantum Alliance of the state of Baden-Württemberg, this is a long-term program, at least for 10 years, presumably for 15 years, with a substantial chunk of money. And it promotes the projects to bring fundamental science to technology. And then at one point, I mean, you see, when you accumulate things, then things come together. And then at one point, the German Aerospace Agency, DLR, decided to open several institutes on campus, and one of them is DLR for Quantum Technologies. Matthias was already mentioning this. So this gave another boost and gave us access to space in a way. So this is how you, when you bring people together and they share a vision, how you can develop an ecosystem. Here in Ulm, next step that we are currently working on is quantum communication. So we already had a demonstration actually this week. We had already one in January this week. So the idea is to have, say, internet, I don't know, 2.0, next generation of internet on campus, but also here in the city, and then basically throughout the state and further within Europe. So one needs to have vision, and the Discovery Center is part of this. It's also, I mean, you need vision and you need persistence. And you need, there is of course things that sometimes do not work, but then you have to simply stick to your ideas, and at one point they turn into reality.
I just wanted to say, though, that this quantum that's coming from the universities is setting up companies here and making it, it's very important for the economics of the area, because we want to have jobs. So that's the idea.
Absolutely.
The spin-offs from the university is to create jobs in our city, high-tech jobs, the future. And I do see that an educational institute like the Discovery Center fits as a puzzle to this whole piece.
I mean, just to tell you a few figures, Ulm is at this point presumably the spot on Earth with the most different platforms for quantum computing. In the DLR Institute, they're up there on campus. They run a program which is supported by the federal government, and I can tell you it's not about 10 million, it's orders of magnitude more. And this money goes to industry. The idea is to support especially startup spin-off companies. There's already a few of them on campus. Envision, you may have heard. This is no longer a startup. This is already a medium-sized company, 200 people working for Envision. They are involved in diagnostics for medical applications. But this is exactly the idea we have, to develop an ecosystem where young people get motivated to basically feel committed to bring something to in terms of company startup to develop technology out of the knowledge that we brought to them.
Thank you. Benjamin, you just told us this great story about Einstein's brain and Einstein's eyes. And people did not respect his wishes. And these were people who actually knew him personally. And you're out there every day posting in his name. So there must be a great responsibility that you feel, that you say what he would have said. And I'm sure that there's a lot of pressure on you because you're so public with what you're sharing. So I would really like to ask you, what do you think would Einstein say about the world we're looking at today?
I mean, it is a very big responsibility to speak in the name and the words of Einstein. I try. The internet, as we all know, can be a very, it's like filled with garbage a lot of times, especially on social media, especially nowadays. So, even if you post something with the best of intentions, you will, certainly get people in the comments, posting mean things. So I do have to be careful. I don't want to unnecessarily shine a negative light on Einstein. But Einstein, as we know and as we were talking about today, was a very politically active person. So to not say stuff, I think, would also be not true to his character. Einstein, I think, would be I think he would be very politically active if he was running the social media account instead of me. Mm-hmm. I think he'd be very politically active. I think he'd be very liberal. I think he would speak out against fascism and authoritarianism, and he would speak out against wars. I also think if he were alive today, he would not be as well respected because you would have people on the other side of the political debate, big people with big social media followings probably making fun of him or things like that. So maybe it's a blessing he was alive in his time and not today, because maybe his image would be tarnished. Unfortunately, I don't know.
Would you like to add something, Karen?
But I think that in his day, they did make fun of him,
too. Yeah, for sure.
They passed him over 10 times for the Nobel Prize and said his science was just Jewish science. Yeah. And so it took a long time for him to become a respected person, respected figure. And I think we have to keep that in mind because he felt that racism. And that racism that was here is really, I think, what catapulted him into helping the NAACP, all these movements in America, anti-lynching, the story with Marian Anderson, those all moved me so much. And when I was in Princeton, they talked about how he would walk down the streets, it's a very segregated city, and he would walk down the streets of, the black section, and he'd sit on porches with people, and he'd invite kids over to help them with their homework. And, he was just an amazing human being. And I don't think that we can say that I think that the push against science today
Yeah.
is serious and trying to discredit it, but I think they discredited him in his lifetime as well.
There was an there was in Berlin, there was some anti-relativity groups, and they would have rallies, and they would have, Einstein once snuck into one of the rallies. They didn't recognize him. He walked in, and they handed him a brochure, an anti-Einstein brochure. So yeah, I mean, he'd certainly...
And there was a book, 100
100
Authors
Scientists
Against
Against
Einstein, and they actually published it in Leipzig. They really tried hard to discredit
It's
him.
available to buy.
Yes, I bought it. I have it. Just,
So when
just
we-
as a
yeah.
curiosity, but I think he experienced a lot of racism.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when we were coming in this morning, you were...
Maybe I
Yeah, sorry.
just to add to this, I mean, of course, you know this, but I could replace it. It was actually after the Nazis took over, there was a movement within the German physical community to get rid of all, say, Jewish kind of physics. So they had the idea to establish what's called Deutsche Physik, yeah, which, I mean, it was put forward and promoted by 2 Nobel Prize winners. So even Nobel Prize winners have mad ideas. And of course it was a disaster, yeah, and was not really well taken by the community because, I mean, you see, after all, physics, there is no Jewish physics, there's no German physics, there is no US physics. Physics is something, it's a methodology that tries to explain phenomena in nature. And we as human beings, I mean, we basically step back. We are just part of a big story. But we don't influence this by our own personality or our background or religion or whatsoever. This is why I mean, science as such, but in particular physics, has been an international endeavor for hundreds of years. So already 200 or 300 years back, people would communicate with letters at that time. I mean, Newton, for example, Leibniz, they had some quarrel at some time about certain aspects. So it was, and this one has to understand that this is, when people talked about Deutsche Physik, this was basically, I mean, hurting science in its core, yeah? So, and people should keep this in mind when they nowadays somehow try to basically come with political ideas to somehow influence the academic system. Academic system needs freedom, and needs free thinking, independent of your political background, independent of your religious background. We have some ways to discuss science, respectful and in tolerance with each other, and this should be given. Yeah? So otherwise, science cannot develop its full strength.
And that's why the Discovery Center is so important, because this would be a place where children can come and dream and see how the physical world interacts with their lives and how they might bring it to the next generation in a different way. But it also speaks to what's going on, particularly in the United States. This push against science is pretty terrifying. And so I hope that the Discovery Center can be a voice for that as well.
And Nancy, you always stress how important this is, that this is a team effort, because everybody always addresses you as Mrs. Albert Einstein Discovery Center, but you're not. You always say this is a team effort. And I would like to go back to Einstein's way of working. So he did think of many things as his thought experiments, but he also collaborated with many, many other people in his life. And maybe both you, Benjamin and Joachim, can tell us a little bit about how he did this and how you do this today.
Yeah, I mean, you see, as I said, Einstein, when in 1905, when he published these 5 papers actually in a row, he was not part of the academic system as such. He was still working as a clerk in the patent office in Bern. Right? Yeah. And so, but he was very much aware of the, at that time, rather small community and what was going on. So he read papers. He exchanged letters. He felt as part of say, a community. And then when he became a professor, he was extremely talkative. So there's many photographs actually taken when he was, say, talking to Niels Bohr, for example, or there were at that time a sort of conference, Solvay conferences they were called, where he was always part of a member. And at these conferences, people discussed the developments of quantum physics and quantum mechanics. Einstein was in a way unique because, you see, when you just think about his scientific productivity in terms of the number of papers, yeah, of course 1905 was a miraculous year, and then he focused on general relativity. This basically was done in 1915, 1916. He kept working on this a little bit, but after this, after 1920, not so many papers were actually published. He was not really someone who each year came out with a new idea and new papers. There was the EPR paper from 35 or so, 34, but that's basically it. I mean, he was still kept working on his idea of, say, a unified theory for gravity and quantum physics. He was at that time not really part, I would say, of the physics mainstream anymore. He couldn't also not really follow, did not follow the state of the art at that time. He was at one point maybe even misled by his great intuition that brought him to general relativity, but the thing became so mathematical at one point that intuition can also you guide in a wrong direction. So in this sense, he was more focusing on his humanitarian part of his personality. This is why he, I think, became so famous, because he is not only a great scientist and was a great scientist, no doubt, but he stepped out and beyond his horizon and thought about things that other, say, physicists at that time never dared to do. Yeah? About, let's say, not only promoting Jewish community, but also about world peace and so on and so on. He was very much involved in setting up Hebrew University. He was basically one of the founding fathers of Hebrew University. So many things for the public he did, and he knew about his impact on politicians and the society. And even though he didn't want to be a hero, a celebrity, he very precisely knew how to basically trigger things. Yeah? So how do we do science now? I already mentioned this. Science is a social event. It's an act of humanity in this sense, because I mean, you see, my colleagues are sitting in Finland, in Paris. Michel Devoré, actually 1 year's Nobel Prize winner, comes from there, from the lab where I spent 20 years ago a year. In the US, in Israel, we have very, very intense collaborations with Hebrew University, with Weizmann Institute. So, and in my group, there is a PhD student here from India. So there is, how many different countries, nationalities do we have in the institute? Like 10 or 15. So from all over the world, China, Japan, whatever, European countries, of course. Yeah. So this is because science is not say due to some, does not depend on your background, on your color, on whatever. Yeah. It's about thinking together to better understand nature. And this is something which goes beyond any individuality. So this is how science, how physics especially, is done today. It's a teamwork. And when we think about the 3 Nobel Prize winners, I mean, they came up with this experiment 40 years ago. But you only win the Nobel Prize when there is some output, when there is some development out of this. And this impact and this development, this has been done by many people. So it's you cannot exclude pick one. At one point, of course, this is someone has a genius idea, but to work this out. Yeah? Even when Einstein, when he worked on general relativity, and general relativity is really a standalone piece, because it was not, say, at that time, people did not think about this. I mean, special relativity I mean, maybe a year later, someone would have come up with this, with special relativity. It was something people were really close to basically discovering it. Photo effect may be the same, but general relativity was out of question at that time. There was a small group of people around the mathematician David Hilbert in Göttingen, and they worked very close together with Einstein, because Einstein had problems with the math, not because he was not a good mathematician, because the mathematics behind this, which goes back to Riemann from the 19th century, was differential geometry, and this was not well developed, even for within mathematics. And so they talked very often to each other. But nevertheless, so general relativity was something which, when I asked about the most famous thing Einstein came up with, then I would say general relativity, because it's just the intuition that he had to connect, say, gravity with acceleration, with geometry. This is really genius, ingenious, and so, yeah.
So Benjamin, who else was on Team Einstein then, besides his first wife?
What's that again?
Who else was on his team, on Team Einstein, besides his first wife?
We had two good friends, Michelle Besso and... Yeah, they used to get together for a book club to read books, and the three of them were in a book club. There's a funny story where one of them, I forgot which one, not Einstein, but one of the other two couldn't meet because he had to go on a date with his wife or something. And so Einstein went to his apartment, and his wife didn't like when they smoked in the house, and he's like smoked all over the apartment so that when they came back from the date, they were... But so I think he was a little bit of a prankster.
Yeah. And I think another thing that people can relate to is this idea of work-life balance. So he wasn't just a scientist, he was many other things. Could you elaborate a little bit?
Me?
Yes, you?
He loved to go sailing. That was, he had a lot of hobbies, and sailing was one of his favorite hobbies. He liked to go on walks, play the violin, right? He said anytime he had he couldn't work through an idea in his mind, he would take a break. And I still take this advice. He would take a break, and he would just I don't play the violin, but I take a break. He said, take a break, play the violin, do something else, and then that would unlock whatever it is, whatever problem it is you're stuck on. Yeah.
So you left it with this great quote here, and I have this wonderful book of quotable Einstein that we should probably send to somebody in Washington so they read this. Yeah. But so if we could have a quote projected on the outside of the Discovery Center, which one would you pick? And this is to all of you.
Well, I would pick this one because of what I said.
Yes.
My most favorite one.
How about you, Nancy? Do you have a favorite quote? You want to have a look?
Yeah, I don't have a famous quote because there's so many of them that are just so... I like the way he uses words. I like how he turns things around. I like how he has a new way of looking at things. Mm-hmm. And I have lots of people give me all these books and T-shirts with all his names, and I don't have a really special one. I do like the one about no special talent. Mm-hmm. But I do think the passionately curious is the most important part. It doesn't matter if you don't have any special talent, but if you're curious in anything, I think that's the most important thing for our lives.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, my favorite story is one that Karen told me about her mother and driving. Maybe you can tell that.
Okay. So when my mom came and she stayed with Albert Einstein, he gave her some money so she could get started in America. So what did my mom do? What was the first thing she did? She got driving lessons. Now, this is 1939, 1940. And he said to her that she was the stupidest person to waste his money on driving because he never drove anywhere. Yeah. He took the bus, he walked, he rode a bicycle. but for my mom, this was this meant independence, especially for a young woman. And so anyway, and taking her keys away when she became elderly was the most difficult thing, I think. So it stayed with her till all her life.
Wow.
Yeah. I really like this story. So Benjamin, do you think he would use like modern technology today? Would he use AI,
sure.
ChatGPT, whatever?
I'm sure he would. I'm sure he'd have like 3 iPhones. I'm sure he would. Yeah.
I would like to make one comment here. When you read Einstein's papers, he was such a good writer. Also, he wrote a lot of poetry. Do you guys know that he wrote poetry?
Yeah.
He did a lot. And I think he was so good with words. And the more I read about it, the more I'm like, he was, even though he says he doesn't have any special talent, he was certainly multi-talented, because the words that when you read his original papers, every word that he wrote there was in there for a reason. It wasn't like blah, blah, blah. It wasn't like using ChatGPT. It's really, he was choosing his words very wisely to make a specific point.
Yeah, this is something I forgot, but when Einstein paid for my grandparents' passage, my grandfather tried many times to pay him back. And he wrote him in a letter, "I don't want to hear about this one more time. It was the best spent money."
Wow.
And that was it.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah. So as a final question, since we're coming to an end, and this is going to be very difficult, I think. So if you imagine Albert Einstein being here on the day we open the Albert Einstein Discovery Center, what do you think he would say? And I would like to start with you and then everybody else, please.
I think he would run inside and start like playing with all the exhibits and things like that. Like that's what I think. I think he wouldn't care about the ribbon cutting ceremony outside or anything. I think he'd want to get inside and just start playing around with things and lead by example. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I would hope that he would continue to use his bully pulpit to motivate the world to be a better place.
How about you, Joachim?
Yeah, maybe you know that there's a story that because he visited Ulm several times after he won the Nobel Prize, and he did this incognito, yeah. So maybe he would go incognito into the museum just to figure out what the young people are doing, just enjoying it, standing aside, not let's say in the center, and just smiling. Yeah.
I totally agree. I think from his personality, when you read about him, he's not going to be the one in the front. He doesn't want to be there. But I can't imagine him taking children and bringing them to things and explaining things to them. And I think that's why we have many teachers in our association. I think it's so important to bring the science and his thoughts and his ideas to the younger generation. But I also think we're always talking about children. I think it goes for all of us. I think it's a place that all of us would want to talk to him and say, what were you thinking about this? But I can imagine him being with the kids in the room, doing something and talking to them. So.
And I think you would have some cake too. I think you really like cake. Well, thank you so much. This was so interesting. Benjamin will have a little time to talk to you personally and also to sign some books outside. And we're also here for your questions afterwards. And we would like to end the panel.
Thank you very much.